דפנה היא חברה בצוות, באנגלית זה נקרא Executive Coaches at Harvard Business School. מה זה Executive Coaches? אולי נשמע מדפנה בעצמה. דפנה היא עורכת דין, בעלת תואר שני במנהל עסקים במכללה המאוד מהוללת בפסון קולג' ובעלת חברה לאימוני כושר. גברת היימן תספר לנו על התוכנית לפיתוח מנהיגות שהרווארד מציעה למנהלים. בבקשה, דפנה.
You need to find your own strength, you need to find your own passion and decide which pathway will lead you to that particular goal. We get people from all different backgrounds, all different industries, all different functions.
It's the ongoing lifelong learning. It's the ongoing transformation of our participants.
That becomes a very powerful learning experience when they all come together in the classroom, which is the richness of the system.
I always say when participants come here that you're not part of a family. This is not a transaction.
We're in a world where everybody is teaching and everyone is learning.
There's an intensity that comes with the academic programs here. It's discussion, it's enriched by people bringing their points of view.
This is a very mission-driven institution. It's a two-way journey. We learn together.
Three kinds of leaders in this world. There are those who make things happen, there are those who watch things happen, and there are those who wonder what happened. And we hope you're the kind of people who make things happen.
Good afternoon, everybody. We're gonna shake it up and move over to English for a little bit. My name is Daphne Heyman. I'm an executive coach at Harvard Business School. I'm part of an executive coach team. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the program for leadership development. Leadership development is a topic that's generating a lot of buzz today. But what does it really mean and how does that happen? We talk about leaders, but is leadership really taught or are leaders just born that way? As the goal of this conference today is to examine each of your individual roles as leaders in your departments, in your organizations, maybe even in the country, I want to share with you some of my experience working with business leaders. So we talked a lot about different kinds of leaders today, and my hope is that through sharing my experiences that I have with business leaders working on their developments, you'll find some similarities and see what's applicable to you. So I'll start just by giving you an overview of the program for leadership development at Harvard Business School. I'll talk a little bit about what leadership is, what are the what are the components of leadership development. Then we'll talk a little bit about the path to finding your authentic leadership. And then I'll wrap up with some thoughts about how Harvard makes that transformation work. So the program for leadership development is part of the executive education courses. Harvard offers this as a substitute to an executive MBA. As the name indicates, the purpose of PLD is to develop and enhance leadership capabilities in individuals that have been identified as star contributors in their organizations. They're about, on average, 37 years old, a very international group, so only 33% are actually Americans, all the rest are from all over, and a large variety of industries. There are 4 modules to the PLD. It's 28 weeks long. Module 1 and 3 are done remotely, they do it online. And modules 2 and 4, they come for 2 very intense weeks on campus. Those weeks are a lot of learning, a lot of networking, and a lot of development work. So there are about 200 people in the cohort in the whole program, and that group is divided into groups of 8. So those groups of 8 we call them living groups. And the coach, my role as the executive coach, is to work with one living group as individuals. So we have a lot of one-on-one work that we do, as well as group facilitation. So we take the group through a process together. We call them living groups because they literally live together on campus. They work together on their group challenges, and they act as consultants to one another for their individual projects. These groups are designed to be culturally diverse. They're also professionally diverse, so we try to have a nice mix in the group. So the components of leadership development. When we talk about leadership development, we have to approach it as a leader, as an individual contributor, as well as part of the team. To have success, the team has to go through its own development process alongside the leader. And for both, they have to go through professional development as well as personal development. So we have the individual and we have the team, and both have to go through professional and personal development. There are stages that teams go through in order to become efficient and successful. Once a team is formed, they start working together and they go through some conflict. That's the storming phase, where the conflict arises. And if we set them up correctly, the team will move on to the norming stage, where they start to accept roles, goals, responsibilities, decision-making processes. And then once we're all done with those 3 stages, the team starts performing. They start achieving their goals, and each individual experiences the growth for themselves as well as for the team. We start our program with team building exercise and continue through a debriefing process that teaches them to examine different strategies of increasing team participation and motivation. So if we heard earlier about playfulness, we start our program with a whole day of playfulness. They're encouraged to reflect on their own leadership within a group of peers where they have no authority. We then move on to discuss stages of team development and put a plan in place for how the team will work together most effectively. So they discuss team aspirations and their individual aspirations for the program. The team commits to providing one another with ongoing and consistent real-time feedback throughout the program. So for example, we'll sit around the table and we'll go from one participant to the next, and they'll say, do you know what, I have a tendency to talk over people. I interrupt people while they're talking, something most Israelis can relate to. But if you see me do that, please stop me, because this is a behavior that I'm trying to change. So as I mentioned earlier, team development must be a part of the process, because we know that if in your development you're thinking only about yourself and not about the development of your team, you significantly decrease the chances of success and real change in your organization. In terms of professional development, participants attend classes and they experience the HBS CASE methodology. We talk about finance and strategy, marketing, and they take classes like most MBA courses do. But we also foster a culture where we are all teachers and all learners. We are responsible for sharing our knowledge and learning from our faculty and peers. Participants work on personal cases and group cases where they're presented or they choose a strategic challenge. And they use models and methodologies that they learn at HBS to implement change and growth in their organizations. And for those of you who will join me later on for the workshop, we'll go through a similar process. But for now, I'd like to turn my attention to the individual in their personal development, which is the coach's main part of the program for leadership development. The goal for personal development is finding your authentic leadership style That means establishing a set of values, understanding what you are passionate about, and what kind of leader you want to be. It's about becoming intentional in your actions and interactions. To figure out who you are as a leader, consider breaking it down into a process into 3 stages. So we start by reflecting on the past, then we move to assessing the present, and finally planning for the future. At HBS, this is where the coaches and the living group's role becomes a crucial part of the participants' transformation. Reflecting on your past is about understanding your leadership story. We all have one. During the first group meeting, we, the coaches, ask each living group participant, so we sit in our groups of 8, we ask them to draw out their leadership path, their life journey as leaders. We ask them not to write out their resumes, but to consider pivotal moments and influential people and experience that shape the kind of leaders they are today. Then, they each present their leadership path to the group in 10 minutes. Up to that point, they were complete strangers. But by the end of the night, as they report, they have a better understanding for one another's life story than even their best friends back home. Writing your own story helps you make sense of seemingly unconnected events in your life that, when pieced together and mapped out, come together to tell the story of how you became the leader you are today. Reflection is a component that runs through all stages of development. After crafting your leadership story, move on to assess your present. At the Program for Leadership Development, we do that by defining leadership competencies. And you can see 9 competencies that we identified as skills, behaviors, and attributes that we believe that for our purposes, for the business leader's purpose, a leader should possess in order to be effective. Each competency is broken into behavioral indicators. And those behavioral indicators are statements that show how the competency looks in action. Before they arrive on campus, participants are given a questionnaire to fill out, and they send it out to peers, managers, clients, and direct reports, and we ask them to do the same. We call this a learning path tool, or a 360 assessment. During our session, they receive a 30-page report with both qualitative and quantitative data. Let's take the communication skill as an example. We want to know if our leaders deliver clear, convincing, and well-organized presentations. Do they encourage open expressions of ideas and opinions within their teams? Do they listen actively? When it comes to influencing and negotiating, we want to hear if our leaders are win-win negotiators. Are they willing to engage in difficult conversations? Are they effective in working through conflict? These questions and more give us a clearer picture of our leaders' performance. We can compare different groups of raters for each behavioral indicators. Is there a difference between how the managers experience our leaders as opposed to how their peers or direct reports experience them? It's also a very powerful tool in terms of measuring your own self-awareness. So as you can see, if you are in line with what everybody else is thinking, then you are probably self-aware. We discussed what they found surprising about these and what just reaffirmed what they already knew. So now they know, and knowledge is power, but what do we do with all this information? Once we feel satisfied with understanding our past and evaluating where we are today, we move on to the next step. Crafting a personal development plan. Planning for the future in this personal development plan comes from all the data that we collected so far. And these development plans need to be focused and actionable. So we ask them to find 1 or 2 areas that they want to improve on, and then 1 or 2 areas that they're really strong at, but still want to work on. And you might ask, why are we wasting our precious limited time on developing our strengths? Right? If I'm already good at something, why do I have to work on it to get better? Well, in today's competitive environment, you don't get noticed for not doing something badly. You get noticed for being exceptional at something. We want to make sure that what we do well, we do even better. We want those strengths to become our differentiators, our identifiable skills that distinguish us from other leaders, because we should work on our strengths, right? No CEO was ever hired just for improving upon his weaknesses. With that in mind, participants create an action plan. We must consider what steps we need to take, move gradually toward our goals. What resources do we have at our disposal? And what our timeline will be. We encourage participants to consider what strengths they possess that might help them work and strengthen their weaker links. Who can support them? Who's going to hold them accountable? And finally, how are you going to measure success? The development plan is an iterative process. It's a live document that should be updated, reviewed, and tweaked as you progress. Writing a development plan takes time, thought, and commitment. And if you end up with something like this and a plan that feels obvious, you might want to reassess the effectiveness of your plan. This is a classic example. If you want to improve your active listening, you can't do it just by deciding to listen better. Consider this example from the world of fitness. If you have a goal of lifting 200 kilo, you can't just come up to that bar every day and attempt to lift it. That attempt alone won't make you stronger. You have to figure out what your prime movers will be, what muscles you need to strengthen in order to do the job. Some are going to be obvious, and some are going to require more research. Then you have to figure out what your limiting factors may be. Are you injured? Are you short on time? What equipment do you have at your disposal? And finally, what are the milestones that you need to reach along the way? To lift 200 kilo, you first have to lift 50, then 75, and so on. Crafting a development plan for personal growth is no different. You need a detailed plan that will consider where you are now, where you want to be, and how you're going to get from point A to point B. You need to be realistic about the time you will devote to it. What might get in your way, and how will you overcome those obstacles? Who will hold you accountable, and who will measure your success? If this sounds like a lot of work, well, that's because it is. And as the cliche goes, he who fails to plan is planning to fail. So we've talked about the process of leadership development, but what is the real secret sauce of the transformation? What do we expect to achieve in our programs at Harvard Business School? Our hopes and dreams for our participants are that we send them back to the real world with a wealth of knowledge and armed with various frameworks to tackle challenges. But even more than that, we hope that their time with us transforms their thought process, that they become intentional leaders. The true power of PLD lies in being immersed in a culture that teaches you to be curious about your surroundings, to value your contribution to the community, and allows you to safely test out different theories and behaviors. Participants learn the power of continuous reflection. They practice pausing, taking a time out, and evaluating their situation, what works and what doesn't. For the 28 weeks, they engage in deep self-reflection. They learn to withhold judgment, take risks, actively listen to their team and their peers. They are encouraged to take responsibility not only for their own development, but for the development of their team. They practice being consistent with their development and form good habits. They establish a growth mindset, open their eyes to cultural differences, and learn how to navigate through those challenges. Participants engage in the practice of giving and receiving real-time feedback. They learn how others experience them and how their actions elicit reactions from others. They're open and committed to becoming the best leaders that they can be. And I will leave you with this. Becoming a leader is synonymous with being yourself. It's that simple and also that difficult. Thank you.
אני תוהה ביחד איתכם, האם כדאי שהמשתתפים ישבו כאן, שתפנו להם שאלות?